Hey friends, this is Natalie Irvin, and welcome to the ICU podcast, where we explore how we can find significance in the unseen work of leaders and to be intentional to truly see others in our everyday lives. I can't wait to share with you, so let's get started. Today's scripture is from Isaiah 9:6. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Hey friends, and welcome back to the ICU podcast, Christmas edition. We are back for a special episode. We kind of took a little bit of a break and we'll continue to do so until the beginning of 2024. But if you're listening right now in real time, it is Christmas. So we decided to do a Christmas episode. I brought along my friend and therapist, Bree Carter, and we're both currently on break. Bree is a counselor at a school and I'm a teacher. So we're living our best life right now on Christmas break. Mm-hmm. And now that we feel nice and relaxed, we figured we'd bring you a special Christmas How to Navigate the Holidays episode. And really the whole ICU theme kind of came in when I was thinking, like, I see you, so many of my friends, so many of the people that are around me looking at Christmas differently, looking at the holidays with different perspectives. So many people are at different stages in their lives, different losses have occurred since last year, changes in families, marriages, divorces, a lot of different things. And so I felt like this was pretty timely and important to talk about because with myself, struggling with anxiety, this is not always the most joyous season for me, and it becomes overwhelming. And I think part of us feels guilty when we even say that because we're expected to be merry and happy and doing all of the things with your kids and going to see Santa and getting on the Polar Express or whatever it is that, you deem as important and fun. And when we don't do those things or when we don't feel as peppy as we should, maybe there's some guilt that starts to set in there too. And wondering, well, why don't I feel that way? Or why can't I get on board with the Christmas spirit? And so I just wanted to bring Bree along because I feel like she has talked to a lot of people about this and probably seen a lot of this in her own life too. So I kind of wanted to just start off on a lighter note because we do have Christmas traditions and we do have things that we enjoy doing. And I know Bree really likes this time of year. So tell me your favorite Christmas tradition, either from the past or present or both.
Okay, I'll do both.
Okay.
Okay, so my favorite, let me back it up. I do want to say that I thought it was beautiful what you just said.
Thank you.
Because I do think, I remember Mother's Day. There's so many mothers who feel unseen. Valentine's Day. And Christmas, I think, is one of those holidays that we don't talk about, those people who don't feel very seen or they dread this holiday, even though it is a beautiful time. So I think that it's really wonderful that God kind of put it on your heart because their stories are just as important. But anyway. Just wanted to say that. But favorite Christmas traditions. So every year growing up, my Nanny Fanny, we had Christmas at her house. We would come in our pajamas. And that was really special. We had a lot of beautiful memories of, she always had everything, like the table setting and everything. But also the gifts were particularly funny and interesting to get. Well, I know Chat's first Christmas with me, Nanny Fanny gifted me crotchless underwear that were like XXX.
Nanny.
Scandalous. And I was like, holding these up, like, what are we doing here? So it was also very comedic. We all looked forward to seeing what we were going to get. Yeah, they all had a story to why she chose that thing. That was really sweet. So she did not know that the underwear was for the purpose that everybody else knew the underwear was for. And then my Meemaw and Bobby, who are no longer with us, but they always made Christmas really special and sweet. And we would have we would draw names. I remember one year Hope and I put our name in the hat repetitively, things like that. But then we would put on shows at the end of the night, that were very, Taylor Swift would be the envious of those shows.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, those were special memories. Christmas was absolutely so sweet and special. And then now I do so many different things with the kids, which I'm blessed because we're home. But they make their friends ornaments, or we make, I think that's the most special thing, is like making things for our family and friends. And so every year, I guess this is kind of not selfish, but it's like my favorite thing. I usually paint a little something for all my friends and family to give them every year. It's something different. Or this year I made ornaments for everyone. But yeah, I enjoy making. We all enjoy. We're givers, I guess. But it's stuff I make, so I'll have to think about that later, what that means.
No, I mean, your kids kind of have that artistic ability too, just like you do.
Yes,
so
they love it.
It's nice to see that that's something y'all can share together, and then they just sit there and like they're so quiet and painting, and it's just like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that their attention span is that long to be able to do that. But you guys come up with some really good stuff.
They do. They are really. I remember when they were younger, expectations. I think I had to really change my perception of. I mean, it could have ended up being a horrible experience for them because the frustration of having to. It's a lot of work getting your colors together, tempered, and then all of your. The newspaper and the water and your brushes and the dogs put up and the kid. And so then whenever you just sit down to get ready to paint, they're like, oh, I want to paint too. Okay. And then you have to do it 3 more times. I think in the beginning when they were really little, my anxiety was like, they're going to get it everywhere. Right. And then I'm going to have to, which happens, I ran out of the black or I ran out of the green. And so it was really... When they were little, I really had to work on my perception of that experience, and now I look forward to it every year. But it took a lot of my softening my heart and not robbing them of that, because I think that would be really easy for me to do. But yeah, they make crafts and ornaments every year, and they love giving them to people. Yeah. And I think it's sweet. So our one Christmas tree is full of nothing but things that they've made, and it is completely full. Awesome. And I love it. Yeah. Anyway, so what is your tradition, old or new, that you enjoyed?
I never really thought of myself as very traditional. Like I don't usually use the word tradition a lot, but when I think back to the things that we did growing up, it really was traditional. I mean, there was things that we looked forward to each year. And if my mom or dad tried to change that up, like we'd be like, wait, but that's not what we always do. And so I guess I was traditional in that sense. But this one, I mean, it's kind of silly, but we used to look forward to, or I did, on Christmas Eve, after the Christmas Eve service, we would go to Longhorn because they were open. And we would eat there, and I don't know why I thought that was very fancy.
But the rolls.
I mean, the
bread.
The bread and
the butter,
very fancy. I looked forward to going to Longhorn, and then we would get to open a gift on Christmas Eve. Oh. So I always knew that I got to look forward to that. But my family, both sides of my family took Christmas very seriously. And my dad's mom, man, her house was like decked out. You know, those houses that all the, I feel like a ton of people had them. What are they like?
The Christmas villages? Is that what you're talking about?
Christmas villages. So she had a bunch of those out. She had all the Santas that like shook their booties and sung songs and all that kind of stuff. And so it was just like kind of magical. Like it was full of stuff. So probably now, like as a parent, I'd be like, oh, it's too much. But as a kid, that was
the best thing.
Dreamland, right? And then my Meemaw was all about the baking side. So we would put on our aprons and I'd be right next to her and we'd make cookies and Buckeyes and all kinds of Christmas treats. And that was just really special time. And I think I did realize it at the time that it was special. I looked forward to it. But now looking back, I realized, gosh, man, I was so lucky because we had both sets of grandparents in our lives and active in every holiday, really.
Yeah. Well, and they were Christmas. Intentional.
They were.
As well, it sounds like. And I think Christmas, kind of like you mentioned earlier about us slowing down, for us this season, it's mainly a positive thing, that we have this time on our hands, but for everybody, it's not, the positive thing to have that much time on their hands. It's kind of like when the intrusive thoughts start to get you, or something else, loneliness. And then I've had clients before who've been very upset about feeling robbed of a childhood or robbed of traditions. And I think that's like what you said about, like, I don't think of it like traditions. I truly, I have diagnosed ADD. So, it's like, it's on a whim, it's just things that we do. But you're right. The kids, they're like, we didn't do X, Y, and Z yet, or they miss it. And it's almost like, maybe I think of it as like habits, like that we store up for this time of year, and then our kids view them as, and we view them as traditions, But yeah, I think that this season can be both beautiful, but it can also be really difficult too.
Yeah. And I think I kind of want to explore that for some people because, like you said, it often gets missed this time of year that not every family is a perfect unit that gets along and fits together and enjoys each other's company. Yeah. There's often, I would say probably more often than not, families are fractured in different ways. Maybe there was an argument a year before and people are still hanging on to it, but they don't want to talk about it. So there's that passive aggressiveness, and there's so many different things, so many different lanes we could go here. But I think, let's talk about expectations. When we come in to a new situation. So let's say when you get married, right? Because when you get married or you start dating somebody seriously, then you have to decide, okay, where are we going to spend Christmas? Yeah. Where are we going to spend Thanksgiving? And I remember our first holidays together, that was really a lot harder than I thought it was going to be because I was so excited, of course, to spend time with him and his family, and they're wonderful, and there's nothing wrong with what they do, but what they did was different than what I always did, and so I guess I am traditional. I hate that, but
I think it's
a habit.
But also it's comforting. I mean, when we've talked about anxiety, we like predictable.
Yes.
We don't like surprises.
That's true.
I think it's similar. It's not something, honestly, we've talked about this on the positive side of being predictable and reliable promotes safety for your children, safety for those around you. You become trustworthy. So it's not a negative thing that you're like, I hate that I'm traditional. I think that it's like, I'm having a therapy session with Natalie. You're framing it as a negative because you viewed yourself as inflexible. Or having a hard time with flexibility because you wanted it to be this way.
A certain way.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it doesn't end up the way that you want it.
Right.
Feels very uncomfortable. So let's talk about that. How do we enter situations where we know things are going to be different than previous years? Maybe not even in a negative way, like we're saying. It could be you're celebrating something great, but
I think it's hard, though, I think it's hard entering a new anything.
Right.
I mean, we could talk about birth, labor. That's new. You have no control over it. It's supposed to be a good time at some point. You don't know when it's going to be.
Yeah.
That's right. And you just try your best. But, I think when you're newly married and some families have so many events, they're so large. And then some families say, it can be, or religious things, even, there are people who, as Brother Darrell would say, who married that were not equally yoked, who have different beliefs. And it does make it very difficult. And then also there's usually hurt feelings. People take things very personal, if you're like, hey, I know we usually go to Nanny Fanny's Christmas, but my husband always does this with his family and we're trying to be even, so we're going to do this. And they're like, well, why did Nanny Fanny's breakfast get thrown under the bus? So I think it's hard, and there's this responsibility to please people to make Christmas a wonderful experience.
Right.
Yeah, so it's hard. I used to have little kids. It's called the Anxiety Buster, where they write all the columns about things I know, things that I don't know, things I can control, and things I can't control. And we usually always know way more than we think we do, and we always can control way more than we think we can. And it kind of helps, I think, sometimes to do it with a spouse or a partner, in order to plan. Like, if I get really overwhelmed, I think sometimes we expect our partners may have a dream view of us and an experience when they have us in the comfort of our home, and they want our friends and family or their friends and families to experience that. But when you're with a bunch of strangers,
right,
and they're like, how are you not seeing what I'm seeing? It is easy to become your fault, Yeah. So it's just like working on maybe talking about some of those things, the reality of it, not planning for the best case scenario, but maybe the reality. Like, it's like going to Disney World. What are 2 things that you for sure want to do?
Yeah.
And as long as you do those 2 things, it's been a pretty good trip.
Yeah.
Instead of like, we got to hit this spot. We got to hit this spot,
And, ultimately you'll be disappointed.
Yeah, and you'll be disappointed. Right. Or you'll find something to be bitter about, or it will be somebody's fault that they robbed you of this beautiful experience when... So, yeah, I think it's like having really small goals and then also really talking about, like, what are things that we can control in this situation? Like, is there a point where we need to leave? Is there a point where, it's important to me that you stay with me? My husband's first Christmas with his family. And I love them so much. And I love Chat so much. But Chat, I walked in. And then I turned around and he was gone. And he was gone for like hours. Found out later, I think he was riding like a 4-wheeler or something. But I was like,
He's having a great time.
I was like, I don't know these people.
Yeah. I need you to help me.
Yeah. And his response to me was, he was like, my mom and sister. And, I was like, but I'm being introduced as your girl. Like, it was, expectations and communication were not there. And I got so tickled because his Uncle Tommy, God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore. But he said, you make ham, good ham? And I was like, no, I actually don't like ham. He said, you make good fried chicken? I was like, I don't make fried chicken. He was like, all right. He said, what about ham rice? And I'd never even heard of ham rice before, but I was like, I make no ham, so there is no ham rice. And he looked at Chat, and he said, what do y'all eat? And Chat said she does make really good chicken and dumplings. And he was like, all right.
That'll get you.
But I just remember being like, wow, like they're staples. And it may have been Thanksgiving, actually, but anyway. But yeah, just communication about all those things. I know when he went and met my extended family for the first time, my great aunt said something. She loves they all do, or did. They're no longer with us, but embarrassing, like turning you red. I think our wedding photo, like he had bruises because my great aunts were pinching his hiney. And so he's not used to them. And so they said something in jest, and he took it very personal, like and I just remember being floored, like,
because it was normal to you.
They're wonderful human beings. How could you ever think that they were being that comment? So, I think it's adjusting your expectations, open communication, not putting expectations that are unfair on your partner, like performance-wise.
Yeah.
Like it's hard.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that John and I talked about when we got married was we knew the holidays were coming up. So we did sit down and make a plan, and we said, okay, every year we're going to rotate. 1 year we'll have Thanksgiving with your family, and then Christmas morning with mine. And then whatever happened after that was fine. But like that was the priority.
Yeah.
And actually it has worked for the most part. I mean, even when my sister and her husband got married, you know, that it's just kind of all worked out.
Yeah.
But there are, you know, we all have expectations, and a lot of times we just don't communicate them, but we expect others to be mind readers to know what our expectations are. And I think that, you know, like you said, it's not really a fair way to go about things, because if we do want something or desire something, then to me, there's nothing wrong with communicating that and saying, I would just love for all of us to be able to get together at my house this year. Or, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but at least you've communicated, this is what I would just love if, you know, we could all do this. And if we can't, then maybe the next year, you know, but having a safe place where you can express, like, this is what I'm thinking and feeling, and this is what I would love to see happen. But that way it's not like, well, they didn't know because you didn't tell them.
Well, I think what you said is beautiful. I think it's so much more helpful to offer an open space or offer to host rather than to complain to someone who's opening their home about, well, this didn't happen and you made them feel like this, and I could tell you got mad when we left early, whatever the case may be.
Right.
You know, instead it's always better to come with an offering and instead of a complaint.
Yeah.
But I always that Ryan Gosling, what do you want?
Yeah. Just
what do you want?
What you want?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just balancing responsibility too.
Yes.
I think travel and like, because I remember we used to always travel, and you know, sharing that responsibility of people that are having to move and who's having to move the most pieces. Like I just remember when we had the kids and they were babies, both of our families were very kind and compassionate towards that. It was, we'll come to you. And they still do, because they know that it's a lot harder to pick up our whole family and go somewhere than it is for them to come to us at that season in their lives. And so like balancing what would make others' lives easier and what's not also inconvenient for me. You know, like how can we balance all of that to fit everybody's needs? And it may not be possible.
Well, I was going to say, I think that is beautiful. But you know, that kind of probably leads us to where we also need to go with the families who are not support, you know, that they want things on their way, terms. Their terms. They're very easily offended, some or have a chip on their shoulders. Who knows? You know, there are sometimes you have in-laws who feel like you stole their child from them.
Right.
You know, and they keep score.
Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of out of that circle of control. Like that would be on the part of the list that I know I can't control that, but I can also anticipate that there may be comments made or there may be things said. And if you anticipate it ahead of time, does it soften the blow a little bit?
It's a different experience. Well, and I will say, too, I think it's how, like, I think venting about it doesn't help.
Right.
I think it's important to talk about it, you know, if your feelings get hurt. But sometimes... which we'll talk about this in a little bit, probably, but I heard, oh my gosh, what was his name? Bobby Lee. Crap. He played Bad Santa. Chat and I just had a conversation. We were like, what is his name? Do you know?
Bobby Lee.
Not Bobby Lee. What's his name? It's like 3 words. He played Bad Santa. He was like dated Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, okay.
What's his name?
Oh my gosh. Everybody that's listening is like, rah!
Yeah, screaming. That guy. It'll come. But he was talking about the passing of his brother. And he said, the easiest or the greatest advice he would give would be to accept that you're always going to be sad, that you'll always be 50% happy and 50% sad for probably the rest of your life. And it'll hit you out of nowhere. Yeah. It's not always at the same time, but especially around the holidays. And I thought that was beautiful. And I think that is a lot of like in-laws. If we just accept that, to tell the story differently, like she is having such a hard time losing her son, you know, and it is easier for her to be frustrated with me, you know, and take that out on me. And one day when I have a child, maybe I'll understand whatever is more helpful to soften your heart. But the acceptance of not wanting to go into a situation and change everybody, you know, I think that's really, I mean, there are people who get banned from family gatherings. There are people who can't stand each other and they know it. And everything they say is like nails on a There are people who have families and they're like, watch them. They didn't bring a thing to eat and they're going to walk out with 10 plates. You know, like just something to be upset about.
There's always something to be upset about.
There's something to be upset about. If you were looking for that, And I think it is very much so, like the acceptance of that people are not perfect. And what do I actually need for me to be able to enjoy Christmas in this situation? Is that possible, you know, and how can we enjoy it? But I think just managing that, not hoping to change people, like that's setting you up for failure every time. Or looking for the offense.
Right. Yeah. That's so true.
Teresa and the sprinkled cookies on Housewives of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think, I'm not going to say that, but yes, I think that is oftentimes where we find ourselves, is looking for something to be mad about. I don't really know why we do that, but we do.
I think it may be anxiety. It could be that it's going against how we viewed. There's so many people who thought their children would turn out one way, and when they don't, it's like they are angry and bitter. Missed opportunities, like, you know, if you have loss, you're just mad. Every time you have Christmas, you think about the person who is not there. And that's a good thing to do to an extent, but when you torture yourself about it, it turns it into where you're bitter.
Right. And that we can't stay in that state of grief, even though it's okay to allow ourselves to go there.
Yes.
We just can't sit in it, you know, like allow it to pass, or find people, surround yourself with people that are going to make you feel loved and safe and happy and enjoy, you know, the things that y'all are doing together, so that it kind of takes that grief and lifts it off your shoulders. So it's not so heavy. And I think about even, I guess, because during the season when Harper was really sick, we didn't ever know when she was going to have a seizure. And oftentimes it happened during family gatherings. And it was just, I didn't want to put myself in that position, but I also didn't want other people to have to witness it. And so we would skip out on stuff, or we would leave early from stuff, or we were really uncomfortable in family situations where there was a lot of people around. And I think that was really hard for them to understand, because they had never been in that scenario before. But I think about parents who have kids who have disabilities, and how oftentimes having to feel like you have to explain things over and over and over again to family members of why your child acts this way, or maybe needs this particular accommodation, or maybe gets overstimulated with large crowds of people, or maybe needs time away, or maybe can't open their presents in front of everybody. You know, there's so many different layers to that. And I think, like you said, having that communication and being able to be open about, this is really what we need in order for our child to enjoy Christmas, in order for us to be able to release that anxiety and that fear.
And I think with what you're describing with the disabilities, I think it's okay to pass it off to not feel like you're the one who always has to carry it or do it. You know, I think you can ask for help.
Yeah.
You know, you can ask for your loved ones. I know my sister and I were close, and if someone were to ever say anything about her children or vice versa, we usually... Because sometimes her kids come and stay with me over break if we're not all sick, or her kids aren't sick. And sometimes my kids go and stay with her over break.
Right.
And I know that she protects them. Yeah. And then when we're in a family setting, you know, but it is funny, because it's like it's so easy to do, but it can feel like a burden when you're alone. You know, when it's like, oh my God, here we go again.
Right. When you feel like you have to be that person.
But like, people love your kids, and like, they are more than happy to talk. The other day, yesterday, Sonia, our friend who I think you had on the podcast for Sailor's Light, she had a bunch of boxes that needed to be delivered to the Children's Hospital in Augusta. And she asked since she knew I was going there for a doctor's appointment, if I would mind. And I was like, of course I don't mind at all. Yeah. And we picked them up and we dropped them off, and she throughout the day was like, thank you so much. Let me know if you need any help. Like, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate this. And to me, it really was not a big deal. And then the NICU manager came down to help get the boxes, and she was like, tell me again, like, who you are and about this. And I did. And I told her my relation to it, I guess, because, I mean, it's Sonia's story. Right. But I was like, gosh, for Sonia to have to, like, retell, you know, it's because I lost a child, you know. And she was like, I was wondering, I said, and Sailor is her daughter's name, so it's Sailor's Light. She was like, I was wondering where Sailor was. I was going to ask. And I was like, you know, for Sonia to have this conversation, it can be heavy.
Right.
You know, I know that she loves talking about Sailor.
Right.
And I know she gets worried about sometimes maybe making other people uncomfortable. But then there's some times where, you know, I can imagine that it's like, I don't want to talk about this today. I just want to drop these boxes off, you know. Yep. But anyway, I think asking for help, it wasn't a big deal at all for me, but it did make me think of like what that must be like for her to do that every time when she does have to do an in-person delivery.
Right. Yeah. And I think speaking of loss, you know, when we go into holiday seasons, especially Christmas, I feel like is very difficult for people when they've lost a family member, either that year or even years before, because you're used to being with that person. And sometimes if it's a grandparent, that person has carried your family. They've been the rock that brings everybody together, that everyone stands on. And then when they're not there, it's like everybody kind of disperses, you know? And it's just... Tell me, you know, what would be your advice for somebody who is going into their first without whoever it is, their person. Their person.
Just a big deep sigh.
It might be a grandparent. It might be a child. You know, it's just so, I think, hard to...
It is so hard. I say I can't rescue you from grief. You know, I can give you tools. Yeah. But the torture and the pain of grief, nobody can rescue you from, you know, and that's just something that the suffering well that we've talked about before. It's usually, I talk a lot about self-care. I talk about really thinking about what would be helpful and what would not be helpful, and not shaming yourself for saying no to things or yes to things. Or even on the day of, you know, if you wake up and it hits you even harder, it's okay to say no to all, you know, like, well, I was clearly wrong about this. Most people are really understanding that first year and even that second year. And then there's some, you know, and it depends on what stage you are in anger. Some people are really angry, and it's okay to be mad. I would say, you know, anger, though, it's there. And then justice of it all. You know, like, death is the thing that we are guaranteed in life, but we, you know, it's something that none of us want to happen to anyone, but it's also something that we really just don't know how to cope with a lot of times. There's not a specific rule book. Yeah. But journaling, writing letters to them, talking to them, singing to them, smelling their clothes, creating things of theirs. I know my grandparents, this will be our first Christmas without them. And their stuff in my house, their furniture and things. That sounds weird. I have their stuff in my house. But anyway.
And it's beautiful.
And it's beautiful. And my grandma's apron that she hand sewed, that my aunt Gail was so gracious to give me, like I was able to, just memories. It just warms your heart. And I know my sister-in-law, who has been gone now 10, wait, is that right? I can't do math. 10 years? Is that right? That's crazy. 10 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time, but it feels very brief. And that first Christmas was so hard because her passing happened soon after New Year's. It was very hard. It was so many unknowns, and I think there was some anger for us for her not being there. We felt robbed and gypped, but we made, I think, a lot of effort to still make it a beautiful experience, especially for her daughter, my niece, Brooklyn. But I think that has been being intentional and talking about it, but not letting it, but talking about her. I know my sister-in-law, Ashley, is really good about that. Like on Mandy's birthday, she'll always write something about, please, I don't want to think the bad, please leave me a funny story about her or something. But I would say those things, like something that is more helpful. Now, some people, they will watch videos of them talking or call their voicemail, and it tortures them.
Yeah.
And you just really have to pay attention to how you feel.
And what's helpful.
Yeah, do the things that are not hurting you. And this will be the last of my TED Talk about the grief. It is okay to have fun without them around. It is absolutely. They are not sitting up there and looking down here and saying, do you really love me? You just laughed at that joke about the crotchless underwear. You're not supposed to laugh for the rest of your life. But there is a lot of people who they feel like if they allow themselves to have love or happiness or just any kind of fruit of that is good, that it means that they no longer they no longer care. That person's life wasn't as worth, like that people can't see them or they'll forget about them. And that's just not true. Yeah. It's just something that causes you more pain. So have fun.
Enjoy. And have gratitude for what's in front of you.
Absolutely. And focus on now as much as possible. But I mean, I think it's more beautiful to think about that they're with us and they're watching us and they feel honored by whatever we're creating. I hope my Mima loves how I've decorated with her items, and she's not like,
I'm sure
Brianna, but like my kids, they love it, and they love telling their friends or showing it or asking me questions about it. Yeah. But, like it just makes me so sad the thought of some things being in a box, And that's because it helps me. Now, for other people, they might want to completely, and that's fine.
Yeah. Different ways to cope. Whatever is helpful for you.
Yes.
I think is the message there. So I guess on the other hand, well, not on the other hand, but there are some people, like you said, who have such fractured family relationships, whether it's through divorce or through just a family that is no longer accepting of them. When they know that it's going to be a negative experience to spend time with their family over the holidays, what would you say is the right course of action? I think there's some people who would say, well, family is family, so I have to do it. There's an obligation.
Sorry,
and I know how you feel about that because I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Or they say, well, because I can't spend time with my family, I have to be alone because there's just nothing else for me to do.
I mean, to each their own. I think there are some people who really believe in the power of reconciliation. And then and this goes back to my religious beliefs. With our relationships with each other are for a purpose. And I'm so thankful for my parents. And my dad, I will always say he's the best dad. But a lot of people can't say that. Chat's dad passed, my husband, his dad passed whenever he was 5. And I can't say that, like, Chat's an unlovable human because he didn't have a relationship with his biological dad, or he didn't grow, or he would have miraculously changed into somebody different. He was 5 years old.
Yeah.
His life, how he describes it to me with his mom and his sisters and his grandparents and his family, it is his life, and it was full.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And I think that I feel that you can do all the things on your end to try to make a relationship work. But if it becomes harmful or it's abusive, or that person, when you're around them, or those family members just hurt you every single time, and it is insanity, I think it's important to remind yourself of who your true parent is, and that's the Lord, and He's perfect. And I think the Lord is completely okay with you separating yourself, putting boundaries, from those people in order, because what happens? We get bitter.
Yeah.
And then some people go down the path of why, or being resentful towards God. And it separates you, or you put your mother issues or father issues or grandparent issues on your spouse.
Yeah.
You replay that out.
Right.
Like the mistrust or the hypercriticism, like your spouse might just be like, hey, did you check on the cookies? And you're like, oh my God.
Can't do anything
right. So I think it does impact us. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to that extent. We don't have to expose ourselves because it's hurtful. And I think it's so much easier when you have kids, because it's like the idea of that person responding the way to your kids, like, absolutely not.
Right.
But also that's my feelings. Maybe I'm a little, but some people are like, well, I don't want my kids to grow up without a grandparent. And it's like, your kids, and I say this all the time, they do not know what they're missing unless you tell them.
Yeah.
The life that you create
is what they know.
And so when you compare to other people and on the Facebooks or the Instagrams or whatever, that they're going and seeing all these things with their grandparents, and it's like, your kids don't know. Your kids don't know. They're happy with the life that they have with you most of the time. And so I think it's important to remember those things, that one, you don't have to go. You don't have to expose. It's okay for them to be mad, because I think it takes a change in that cycle for them to take tentative action. It shouldn't be an expectation that you just go.
Right.
But that's what I would say. I mean, I think that to be in a place, we can't always do that. There are plenty of spaces that we, either ourselves or people who are of different race or different sexualities, they will always be hated in certain spaces. And they cannot change that. And it is heartbreaking. But honey, like, if you can change it, like if this one thing, the holiday, or this one, those people that you can choose not to talk to, or be in a space where you feel that intense hatred or whatever it may be. Discomfort. Yeah.
And I've always said that, there is no doubt that family is family. When you're blood related, you can't change that. But friends
absolutely
can be your family too. And we've experienced that through our community of friends. We've done so many things with them, and we've been held up by them, and we've been encouraged by them, and we've just surrounded ourselves with people that make us feel loved and cared for in any season, in any holiday. And so I want that for other people to know that, if you can't go home, you can come to my house, or you can come be with us in this Christian community of people who love you and will care for you and make this holiday special. Even though you're not with family, it's even better. In a sense, that you're being loved, like Jesus desires for you to be loved, and you can enjoy yourself, and it's okay to have fun in that friend circle, in that friend group, even though you're not with blood-related family.
Yeah. It's like the difference between a vacation and a trip, you know?
Yeah. It's just, I just think about that because I know we both have really good friendships with, our circles and just how supportive they all are. And so even if we didn't have certain family members, present in our lives, which luckily I think we both do have really great families, but I think that our friends also fill that space too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think there's times where, our families have been unavailable to do things, whether it be to distance or other things, and having your friends there to step in is absolutely incredible. And, really such a blessing, such an incredible blessing. My cousin, who I keep talking about all these people who have died in my family, but anyway, he was my pastor.
You do have some people left in your family?
We do. I do have people left. But Brother Daryl, Brother Daryl, he's our pastor. He baptized me, married me, dedicated me, all the things. That sounded weird. But anyway, he's wonderful. But he's also my dad's first cousin. They looked sort of similar, and they shared memories. And I love and I miss him so much. But I called him Brother Daryl my entire life. I didn't call him Cousin Daryl or Pastor Daryl. I called him Brother. And I think about, and the reason for that is he talk about being brothers and sisters in the spirit, that we are family.
Yeah.
And I really do think that we put so much emphasis on that scripture about blood is thicker than water, and I don't have my notes on my phone, but there is a scripture that if you read it in its entirety and break it down, what it means is actually that the bonds that we create outside of the blood are thicker and more important and intentional. And I think people get that one wrong a lot. I think God permisses things, and there are reasons that we are created through those biological
families.
What's the word that Morris used? Mating.
Great.
My son Morris. That would be the word. But there's a purpose to that, but it doesn't mean that you should be chained to them forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really do hate that there are people who feel that way, that they hear that over and over. It's used, blood is thicker than water. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pounded into them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really just a tool to make you feel manipulated into doing something you don't want to do.
Or guilty, or like you're doing something wrong, or that you're the black sheep and left out. It always comes back to this, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
That my parent didn't love me enough, or my grandparent, or whoever. And it's how's that helpful?
Right. Especially in this season.
Yeah.
And I think we put a lot of emphasis on Christmas, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get everything right.
Yeah.
To have all the presents perfect, to make sure that we create all these experiences for our kids. But like you said, your kids don't know what they're missing out on unless you tell them.
Yeah.
And I've learned that from you with my daughters, and they just enjoy my presents. They just enjoy making these ugly gingerbread houses. They just want to be on the couch with me. They want to just watch a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
They don't care about, all the glitz and the glamour. And maybe one day they'll ask for those things. Maybe one day they'll have requests that they make. This year, Adeline asked for the first time, could we decorate gingerbread houses? And I was like, sure. And so that's something that she enjoyed, and we got to do together because she does love to build things, and that perfectly aligned with things that she enjoys. So I love that. And I think as they get older, we'll start to create even more things that I guess are traditions.
Yeah. Well, and it's memories, and I think even the bad ones, what was it? My cousin Brett found at one of the last times we had breakfast at Nanny's. It was peppermint jelly, and it was so expired, and it was so nasty. And then I was really alarmed by all the food that we were eating. But it's things that we still talk about that are memories, and we get really tickled about. Yeah. And so those mistakes are really, it's something that your kids remember. If somebody always burns the biscuits, it's something that as they get older, they're I think it's just a time. I think remember the reason for the season. I think it is that we're together and we're celebrating love. We're celebrating this beautiful gift that we've been given. And I mean, Lord, Mary and Joseph, you want to talk about like expectations not being met.
Yeah.
Talking about, girl, there ain't no room here. Bye.
Well, I'm just thinking about even like I did not want this to just be a downer episode. I wanted it to be encouraging because I think that there are strategies we can use. There are ways that we can change our perspective.
Yeah.
There's reframing our thoughts on things that will make all the difference in the world, that we can actually enjoy the space that we're in and the season that we're in. And we should be able to do that because that's what God desires for us. Like the Lord does not desire for us to be overwhelmed or fearful or angry or bitter, and all of those are not of him. So I think when we're talking about from a Christian perspective, like even just having a look back on God's faithfulness in our lives. And you know, in the Bible, of course, Jesus's birth was prophesied thousands of years before it even happened, and then God was silent for 400 years. And so you're looking at, you know, that whole time, and I'm just thinking, like, how did they even keep their faith? Like, how did they believe that God would fulfill this promise? But they did. They had that, you know, belief that one day this Redeemer, this King was going to come, and it was so different than what they expected. But I think, you know, as you read in Luke, in Matthew, when they go over, I guess it's in Matthew, the genealogy, you can see God's faithfulness in every single way that he used
every little tiny thing
and women in the Bible, and just the way that Jesus was all part of that plan. And so because of that, like because of what Jesus has done for us, we can trust in God's faithfulness in whatever situation we're faced with, bad or good. And I think that'll change depending on what season we're in our lives, you know?
Yeah. And I think there's, when we talked about like whenever Avery had her seizure, I was crying and like y'all were praying over me. Obviously, neither one of us had the foresight to years and years and years and years going past, and like how that has made sense now,
right?
I think in some ways. But then, you know, like that, it was like we were just getting hit over and over. And I was like, all right. You know, next thing. But like, you know, thinking about the story of Jesus's birth, I think about like, you know, an angel told her this, and then she's like trying to have, you know, writing and like, oh my gosh, like being pregnant and miserable. And like, can you imagine being like, oh my God, this is supposed to be the Savior, you know? And then like,
and you're riding on a camel or a donkey
or something. And then you get there and like nobody has room for you. And you're like, are you kidding me?
That would be.
And then you're just like in a barn with some animals and some weird men coming up with frankincense and myrrh and stuff. And it's like, I don't need your essential oils. I need
to be alone.
This is too much. It's been a lot.
Okay? Yeah, I wonder if she was overstimulated with all
Maybe
that.
she was.
You know, maybe not. Maybe she was just overjoyed.
Oh my God. And like the milk
this
and
is the Savior.
Yes, she was overjoyed that this was the Savior. You know, that is, I really do think I enjoyed having like when my kids were here, it was beautiful. But like the human experience is something, you know, it is beauty, but it is also a lot of pain. It's a lot of like out of control. And I think that had to be much of the same. I think she probably was. She probably yelled at Joseph.
I'm sure.
He might have shushed her like Chad tried to shush me because he thought it was soothing. But I thought he was trying to tell me, shut up. And I said, don't tell me shut up.
Oh,
I did. I said a lot louder.
I think we do kind of forget about that Jesus was fully human. So then that means that Mary and Joseph also were. And so their experience, I'm sure, was...
She didn't know there was going to be a song about her. Mary, did you know? You know? And she's like, no, I did not know. As I was like birthing my, you know, she did not know.
She
knew, but she didn't.
She knew, but she didn't know.
Which goes back to the things we know, the things we don't know.
Things we can control,
the things we can't
control. And
Look
now
at
we've come full circle. I love it. I knew we'd get there. Every time I'm with Brie, I'm like, we're winging it. And I think that some of the things that we talked about are helpful. And hopefully people are able to be encouraged by that, and that ultimately, you know, when we have a relationship with Jesus, like, we can have that eternal perspective. Yeah. That, like, even though there are things that are so broken in this world, and there are things that are not right, even in our own families, that things will be made right. And that we can trust God in that, and that we can just worship. I think worship, honestly, takes you from a place of bitterness, anger, grief, all of the emotions that you feel, and takes you to a place of gratitude. Yeah. Like, I always feel that way. And even when I'm just, you know, when it's dreary outside and you feel like really just depressed. Yeah. And I mean, I'll just cut on all the lights and turn on some worship music. And I feel like that's just one thing that kind of helps lift my spirits, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's just, God has provided us the opportunity for joy. We just have to look for it. And I mean, like, I think even in the hardest seasons, it's there. Yeah. You know, it's there. And it's so, we start off like from grumpy in the morning to excited to frustrated to, oh, I forgot to do this. Like, we go through so many emotions. And the idea that we have the capability to experience that means that we also have the ability to experience that on a day that predictably, usually, might be hard for us. You know, you may feel, we just got through talking about how we have no control. You do have choices. You do have free will. And I would say even for people who don't have a faith or believe in God, what we've talked about is true. I think protecting yourself, surrounding yourselves with people who care and love you, and seeing those people as your family, allowing yourself to accept not being able to change people. Definitely wouldn't want them to change you, you know, unwillingly. Right. And, you know, focusing on the joy and how you're talking to yourself about stuff, you know. Just because somebody gives you a bad look across the room, they could be constipated. You know,
they probably are from all the food.
They could have just like
boards, all the.
They could, like, you know, be thinking about something from last week. We don't have to have this narrative that it's always us. Yeah, something's always us. Being maybe that would be a reason for the season try not to be so easily offended, because it hurts you.
Yeah, and it's not all about us. The reason for the season is Jesus.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that.
There is that. A reason for the season. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look at Home Alone. The boy's whole family left him.
When I look back, John,
it's alarming.
Listen, we could get so off topic with this, and I think, you know, we'll wrap it up in a second. But when we watched this, together the other night, and John said, what would you do if you were in midair going to France and you left your child at home? And I was like, I would never do that. Never.
But in Hollywood.
In
the 90s.
Anything can happen.
It can happen.
But you know what? He was so happy to be alone for a little bit. And I was like, if I was him and it was me now in this current circumstance of my life, I'd be like, woo! I'd be jumping on the bed, ordering pizza, eating ice cream, watching.
No, I remember watching that and thinking, shows. Like, he's doing everything. Yeah. Even Richie Rich, whenever I just saw these movies about these kids having autonomy. Yeah. You know, and being alone. I was like, yes.
I know. That's what we wanted.
I wanted to be.
Now we have autonomy, but we have little children following us around, so we're not really alone.
Yeah, but that doesn't bother me so much unless I'm, know, sensory overload.
Yeah.
The Lord has worn me down. In a good way.
We're thankful for our kids.
Yeah, Mama Avery said to me one day, she was like, you just like love all these kids at school. Like, they all love you and you love them and you give them hugs and like these people. She was like, how do you do that? She was like, it's hard to love people. And I was like,
so true. It's very.
I was like, you know what? It is hard. I was like, Mama wasn't always this way. I was like, but I do feel like God has given me this gift. I didn't want to say from softening my heart, which usually comes from hearing the worst of the worst, maybe experiencing some bad stuff, seeing some bad stuff. You know, it makes you really grateful for days where all I got to worry about is that icing that dropped on the floor. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Perspective, yeah.
Well, thanks for giving us your perspective on this special Christmas episode.
Thanks for having me.
And I hope that you guys were able to be encouraged through this episode and that you have a very Merry Christmas and happy holiday season with your family, and just that you're able to enjoy time with the people that love you most, whether that is your family or your friends or whomever is in your life. So,
or if you want to be like Macaulay Culkin and just be alone.
If you want to binge Netflix and eat ice cream, then more power to you, and enjoy
we support
the season.
You. We see you.
We see you in whatever stage you're in, and fully support it. But we will be back in the new year with the ICU podcast. Thanks for watching.